Chapter 1. The Ultrasound. It started with a single image. A grainy black and white ultrasound photo posted suddenly in the family group chat, captioned with cheerful emojis and the words, "We're expecting." Sophie stared at her phone, her fingers frozen above the keyboard. The name above the message read, Crystal L., a name she had grown used to ignoring. The kind of girl who hovered on the fringes of everyone's lives, offering polite smiles and passive-aggressive compliments. Sophie had never liked her, but they had shared too many mutual circles to openly feud. Still, nothing about this was casual. The image, the caption, the timing. It all struck like a lightning bolt through a calm sky. She stared at it again, this time noticing the subtle heart-shaped frame around the ultrasound, the carefully placed hand on what looked like a modest bump in the accompanying profile picture. Beneath the post, comments flooded in, clapping hands, pink bows, tiny shoes, and rows of congratulations. Aunt Deborah had already asked about a registry. Crystal replied with smiling emojis, acting overwhelmed by the support. It was an expertly executed announcement. Too perfect, too rehearsed. And one detail made Sophie's stomach twist with nausea. The father, unspoken in the message but implied in every word, every emoji, every line, was Nick. Nick, Sophie's boyfriend of 2 years. The man who had promised to move in with her that spring. The man who, just last week, had kissed her forehead before rushing off to work, with no indication that anything in his world had changed. They had shared a quiet dinner that evening. Chicken stir-fry. He had talked about a possible promotion. And now Crystal was expecting? With his child? She waited. Waited for Nick to say something. Anything. She sent him the screenshot with no context. Just the image and the question that was already burning her throat. Minutes passed. Then 10. Then an hour. When he finally responded, there were no words. Just an ellipsis. Then silence. That silence roared louder than any denial. From that moment, a shift occurred in Sophie. The disbelief didn't shatter all at once. It cracked along the edges like thin glass under pressure. She replayed every recent interaction with Nick, every time he'd seemed distracted, every phone call that ended too quickly. It wasn't just Crystal's announcement that hurt. It was his reaction. Or lack thereof. No anger. No denial. No defense. Just quiet acceptance. Crystal, meanwhile, moved fast. Her social media profile transformed overnight. Where once there were photos of brunch and beaches, there were now prenatal updates and pastel-colored quotes about motherhood. A bump photo surfaced just a week later, along with a caption about morning sickness and cravings. By the second week, she had posted a sonogram video with piano music playing in the background. Sophie couldn't look away. It was like watching someone rewrite her life in real time. Her friends sent messages, some cautious, some explosive. One asked if Nick had cheated. Another speculated that Crystal had been trying to trap him for months. Sophie didn't reply to any of them. She needed clarity, not noise. But clarity never came. Not from Nick, not from Crystal, not from anyone. The only thing she had was that image, that carefully chosen photo, and the knowledge that something didn't add up. Sophie wasn't the kind of woman to unravel easily. She wasn't impulsive. She wasn't jealous. But she was observant. She knew dates, knew timelines. And something about Crystal's story moved too quickly. The bump appeared too soon. The test, the appointment, the framing, all of it seemed manufactured. But doubt, once planted, could rot even the strongest convictions. And that was how Sophie found herself staring into a screen, not out of heartbreak, but out of curiosity. Out of the first flickering instinct that perhaps, just perhaps, this wasn't about betrayal. It was about deception. Chapter 2. The Living Room of Lies. Crystal's pregnancy became the central topic of every gathering. She took to it like a stage role, delivering each moment with measured grace. At family dinners, she gently rested her hand atop her stomach, as though acknowledging a presence no one could see. She smiled when others offered advice about diapers and bassinets, nodded thoughtfully when someone recommended a brand of organic formula, and laughed softly when elderly relatives told stories about colic and sleepless nights. Every detail of her performance was curated to perfection, and no one seemed to question it. Nick, too, was drawn in. Whether it was guilt, fear, or a misguided sense of responsibility, he became part of the act. He started attending her prenatal appointments, or at least claimed to. Photos began appearing in his social media stories, waiting rooms, ultrasound posters, a blurry hand on a baby bump. He captioned them with pacifier emojis, hearts, and cryptic lines about beginnings. Sophie watched it all unfold from the outside, as if the life she had built with him was being replaced in real time by something false yet unchallenged. To everyone else, it looked like a natural progression. A man stepping up, a woman embracing motherhood, a family expanding. But Sophie saw something else entirely. She saw the inconsistencies, the too fast milestones, the perfectly filtered updates that didn't quite line up with medical reality. The first ultrasound photo had come too early. The belly grew too quickly. The baby shower invites were drafted before the second trimester. And then there was the memory, faint but sharp, of Crystal laughing weeks before the announcement, boasting in hushed tones at a mutual friend's party that she knew how to make Nick stay. At the time, Sophie had dismissed it as attention-seeking. But now those words returned, echoing louder than ever. Sophie didn't confront anyone. Not yet. She withdrew quietly, never missing a dinner, but staying silent through the baby talk. She offered smiles, polite nods, even brought a gift once. But beneath the surface, a storm gathered. She didn't scream. She researched. It started late at night. While others slept, Sophie scrolled through forums and medical threads, comparing gestational timelines, studying ultrasound patterns. She downloaded pregnancy tracking apps, pretending to be a first-time mom. She cross-checked Crystal's social media timestamps with her own memories of events. Things didn't align. The due date shifted from March to February, then to late January. In one post, Crystal mentioned being 8 weeks along. In another, just days later, she said 12. That's when Sophie reached out to an old classmate who worked at a women's clinic. Casually, carefully, she asked how difficult it might be to fake an early pregnancy. The answer surprised her, not difficult at all. Stock photos, temporary prosthetics, even apps that generated custom ultrasound images. The online marketplace was filled with tools for deception. One evening, Sophie dug further. She traced the watermark from Crystal's first ultrasound photo. A reverse image search revealed the same scan, identical in shape and resolution, posted months earlier by a lifestyle blogger in a different state. The caption had been cropped out. Crystal had stolen it, edited it, and passed it off as her own. That was the moment the truth crystallized. The pregnancy wasn't real, not partially exaggerated, not misdated, entirely fabricated. But Crystal had convinced everyone. And Nick, whether knowingly or not, was playing his part. Sophie understood now. This wasn't just a lie. It was a performance, built scene by scene, hosted in living rooms where truth went uninvited. And if no one else would question it, then she would have to be the one to tear the curtain down. Quietly. Precisely. On her own terms. Chapter 3. The Celebration of Illusions. The invitations were floral, cursive, and sickeningly sweet. Crystal's baby shower was set for a Sunday afternoon in a private garden hall, complete with catering, a photo booth, and a carefully curated Pinterest aesthetic. White and pink balloons floated like soft lies above tables draped in pastel linens. Cupcakes were frosted with delicate letters spelling out a name that didn't belong to any child. Diaper bouquets stood in glass vases beside jars of candy and tiny framed quotes about motherhood. A wooden sign welcomed guests with the words, "A little miracle is on the way." Everyone came. Nick's parents arrived first, bringing with them a wrapped gift the size of a bassinet. Crystal's colleagues trickled in, exchanging hugs and compliments. Her college friends took selfies with her, all hands on the bump, all laughter and filters. The music was light, the scent of vanilla filled the air, and beneath it all throbbed a rehearsed warmth, too perfect, too polished. Crystal moved like a hostess in a romantic comedy, her gestures slow and intentional, her eyes scanning every reaction. Sophie had not planned to attend. At first, the very idea of being present at such an elaborate performance felt unbearable. But then came the evidence. And once the truth solidified, so did her resolve. For an entire week, she had worked quietly, like a surgeon preparing for a single, precise incision. First, she verified the doctor Crystal claimed to see. No such name appeared in the state medical database. Then the clinic, just a rental office with no record of prenatal services. The ultrasound photos, upon close inspection, showed signs of being edited. The date font mismatched industry standards, and a reverse image search exposed the same image on a stock photo website under free to use. But the final proof came unexpectedly. Nick had spent a night at Crystal's apartment after one of her bad days. Sophie had known. She hadn't asked, hadn't accused. Instead, she waited. And once he left the next morning, she found the opportunity to retrieve the sheets. It took 2 calls and 1 favor from an old classmate in a diagnostic lab. The results arrived within 3 days. No traces of fetal DNA, no markers of pregnancy. There was no baby. She printed the report on crisp paper, folded it neatly, and placed it inside a pale pink envelope. No note. No message. Just the data. Cold, factual, undeniable. She chose her outfit carefully that day. Clean lines, neutral tones. Nothing that screamed confrontation, but nothing submissive either. She walked into the venue as if she belonged, not because she was welcome, but because she carried something heavier than shame. She carried the truth. The crowd was thick with smiles and shallow conversations. Crystal spotted her immediately and beamed as though greeting a distant cousin. Her eyes sparkled. She gestured toward the dessert table and reached for Sophie's hand. Sophie nodded politely and stepped forward, her bag pressed to her side. The moment came like the eye of a storm. The chatter around them dulled, phones clicked, cameras caught curated joy. And Sophie, with the silence of precision, handed over the envelope. Crystal took it with a curious smile, thinking it was a card, perhaps a heartfelt wish. She opened it casually. Her eyes scanned the document. The smile faltered. Her expression held for a second too long, and then her fingers tightened around the page. Nick approached from the drink station. He noticed the envelope, the expression, the sudden stillness. He leaned over her shoulder, read a line, and froze. His glass tilted slightly, forgotten in his hand. Sophie didn't wait for questions or reactions. She turned, walked through the white arch of balloons, and stepped back into daylight. Behind her, the celebration continued, or tried to. But the illusion had been punctured. A single page had shifted the weight of the entire room. Chapter 4. The envelope in silence. Sophie arrived last. The party was already in full bloom when she stepped through the entrance. She wore white, unadorned and clean, a sharp contrast to the pastel chaos around her. No gift weighed her arms, no card, no wrapped box, no flowers. Just a small envelope tucked into her bag. Pale pink, ordinary to the eye but heavy with consequence. The heads turned one by one, a ripple of recognition and confusion spreading across the room. She felt the shift in the air, the subtle recalibration of attention. Whispers hummed behind hands, eyebrows arched above champagne flutes. She moved slowly, her steps calm and deliberate, as though gliding through fog. Her eyes swept the space without lingering, the paper flower wall, the dessert table lined with marshmallow rattles, the centerpiece cake shaped like a baby bottle with a fondant ribbon. She walked past a table covered in framed maternity photos. Crystal holding her stomach against a field of daisies, laughing in a staged, candid, silhouetted in profile. There was no room for doubt in these images. They told a story that everyone had come to believe. A story with soft edges and tender beginnings. Sophie kept moving. Near the center of the room stood Nick. His hands were in his pockets. His expression was tired but not surprised. He looked as though he had been holding his breath for days. Crystal stood beside him, surrounded by guests, a crown of artificial flowers resting atop her perfectly styled hair. Her smile was wide, welcoming, ready to perform, until she saw Sophie. The energy shifted. Sophie reached them without hesitation, nodded once, then reached into her bag. She pulled out the envelope with the same ease as someone handing over a thank you note. No words, no ceremony, just an offering. She extended it to Crystal. The gesture was graceful, almost polite, like passing a napkin across a table. Crystal took it with a tilt of her head, still smiling, still playing the part. She opened it slowly, expecting perhaps a handwritten note, maybe even a reconciliation attempt. Instead, she unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. Her eyes moved across the lines. First confusion, then stillness. Her smile did not falter immediately. It clung for an awkward second, out of habit, out of denial. But then it slipped. Her fingers tightened slightly. Her face drained of color in a subtle but unmistakable shift. Nick leaned in instinctively, reading over her shoulder. His eyes scanned the page once, then again. His jaw locked. His hands, once hidden in his pockets, emerged clenched and trembling slightly. Around them, the party continued, in fragments. A laugh near the bar, a clink of glass, a flash from someone's camera. But a new silence had taken root, blooming in the center of the room like an invisible explosion. It spread slowly, muting conversations, freezing gestures mid-air. No one knew what had happened, but everyone felt it. Sophie didn't wait. She turned. Her pace remained unhurried as she moved through the guests, past the tables, past the decorations, past the artificial celebration. She walked out without looking back, her spine straight, her breath steady. No one stopped her. No one called her name. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and inside, under the floating balloons and crumbling illusion, the truth remained. Silent, printed, undeniable. Chapter 5. After the storm. The next morning, the group chat was still. No new messages, no celebratory photos, no gushing thank yous or smiling snapshots from the baby shower. Crystal's name sat at the bottom of the screen, unread, untouched. Her usual stream of curated content, the soft-lit selfies, the inspirational quotes, the pastel-hued pregnancy updates, vanished. She posted nothing. Not that day, not the next. The silence was louder than any confession. 2 days later, Nick arrived. He didn't knock. He didn't carry bags or offer explanations. He simply appeared at Sophie's porch, sat on the top step, and stared out at the street. His posture was heavy but not broken. His eyes were tired, not pleading. He didn't speak, and neither did she. The distance between them had already been carved out, not by anger, but by erosion. Slow, inevitable. After some time, he stood, gave a small nod, and walked away. No dramatic goodbye, no promises, just absence. They were no longer together. But they weren't enemies either. Their connection had been severed with quiet precision, not with violence. What remained between them wasn't love, nor was it resentment. It was simply history. Shared, but now closed. Crystal disappeared completely. Her social accounts were either deactivated or wiped clean. Her name was no longer tagged in family posts or group updates. Those who had once celebrated her glowed-up persona and styled pregnancy photos now said nothing. No one defended her. No one asked what had happened. The envelope Sophie had delivered had done its work, not through spectacle, but through quiet credibility. The exposure had been surgical. There had been no fight, no shouting match, no confrontation in front of a crowd. Just a single page of truth, handed over in the most public yet controlled moment possible. It left Crystal no room to spin, no exit path to victimhood. Her performance crumbled without resistance. Whatever she had been trying to build, a relationship, a reputation, a false identity, dissolved. The trust she once manipulated now belonged to no one. Sophie watched the fallout unfold not with satisfaction, but with a distant clarity. She didn't seek revenge. She didn't post a thing. She didn't tell her friends the details or relive the moment in circles of validation. She remained quiet. Always quiet. A month later, she packed her things and left the city. No farewell party, no dramatic announcements. Just a new lease in a smaller town, a quiet apartment near a park, and a business idea she had kept shelved for too long. She started again. On her own terms. When asked, she simply said that things didn't work out. She never mentioned the pregnancy that wasn't, the party that imploded, or the envelope that rewrote everything. Only one or two close friends knew the full story, and even they didn't ask for details. They understood the weight of silence. In her new life, Sophie found peace not in vindication, but in movement. She did not chase closure. She didn't need apologies. What mattered was the absence of the lie, and the space that remained once it was gone. Crystal became a footnote, Nick, a quiet echo, and Sophie, at last, was no longer the outsider in someone else's illusion. She was the author of her own beginning. Chapter 6. The Voice in the Mirror. It had been a full year since the party. The seasons had changed, the routines settled, and Sophie's life had quietly rebuilt itself into something sturdier, simpler, and hers. She no longer woke with the heaviness of unfinished words or the sting of betrayal. The pain had dulled, replaced by a quiet certainty that she had done what was needed, and that it had been enough. One afternoon, in the middle of a rainy weekend, she wandered into a nearby shopping mall. She had no real destination in mind, just a vague need to be among people, to observe life in motion. She walked past the bookstore, the cafe, the window displays shifting from autumn into early holiday sparkle. Then she saw her. Crystal. She was standing outside a jewelry store, angled slightly toward a man who looked eager and unaware. He held her shopping bags, laughed at something she said, and gestured toward a display of rings. Crystal smiled, that familiar tilt of the head, that practiced softness in her eyes. She looked unchanged. Her hair still curled at the ends, her outfit carefully styled, her posture exuding charm. If anything had ever touched her reputation, it didn't show. Sophie didn't move. She didn't hide. She simply stopped, half behind a pillar, and watched, not out of bitterness, not out of fear, but out of quiet observation, as one might examine a painting they had once owned but no longer needed. The man beside Crystal looked at her like she was magic. Sophie recognized that gaze. She had once seen it in Nick. Crystal never noticed her. She remained fully immersed in her performance, laughing just loudly enough, brushing her hair back just gently enough. And as Sophie turned to leave, her eyes caught the mirrored surface of the store's glass. For a brief second, she saw both their reflections. Crystal in the center, radiant and composed, and herself at the edge, steady and still. It wasn't jealousy that stirred inside her. It wasn't anger. It was understanding. She had spent so long trying to define what revenge meant, At first, it seemed like exposure, the moment of unveiling, of turning the lie inside out for the world to see. But now, looking at that reflection, she understood something deeper. Real vengeance was not the explosion. It was the exit. It was the act of walking away with your truth intact, while the lie collapsed under its own weight. There had been no need to ruin Crystal. No campaign, no retaliation. Just one moment of truth, delivered at the right time, in the right way. No one shouted, no one begged, and yet everything shifted. That was the power of clarity. That was the real ending. Sophie turned from the glass and kept walking. She didn't look back. For the first time, she saw herself clearly. Not the woman who had been deceived. Not the partner left out of the story. Not even the deliverer of justice. She was simply someone who had chosen truth over chaos, dignity over spectacle, and peace over resentment.